We shall start with our first speaker, Dr. Radhika Natarajan, who is the Deputy Director of the Department of Cornea and Refractive Surgery and also heads the Department of Teaching and Training at Shankar Nethralaya, Chennai. And she is going to be talking on blepharoconjunctivitis, clinical presentations, differential diagnosis, and management. On to you, Dr. Radhika.
Good evening, everybody. And thanks to Dr. Chitra, first of all, for her untiring efforts on the academic front. Kudos to you. And my contribution today will be, share my screen in a minute. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm Radhika from Shankar Nethralaya, and I'm going to be speaking to you on blepharokeratoconjunctivitis. It's actually a case series and diseases that may look like that. So BKC can happen because of anterior blepharitis or posterior meibomitis. In the hormonally active young age group, there could be blockage of the oil glands that manifests as dandruff of the hair, acne of the face, and as meibomitis on the lash margin. Since the pathology is the same underlying the triad, all three need to be treated to get proper results. Is the altered quality of secretion rather than quantity that is more important. And that is what sets up bacterial colonization and leads to an immune response. So when recurrent chalazion are there, one has to sometimes look for untreated refractive error because the children squeeze their eye and that alters the meibomian milieu. So that needs to be considered. Very rarely there could be underlying juvenile diabetes also. As supportive treatment, you could use doxycycline, which is an excellent anti-inflammatory and a modest antibiotic. But in small children, it can cause tooth staining. So erythromycin is better. But the primary treatment is in the eye. You can see in the picture over there that there is a meibomian cyst, and where it touches the cornea, that is the typical location for the staph immune ulcer. So topical treatment includes lid margin cleaning. That is the mainstay of the treatment. Along with that, lubricating eye drops. And when there is corneal involvement, you may need to give a light steroid with always an eye on the epithelialization, with which you can see in the last picture that healing has happened. This looks much like the previous case of marginal ulcer. There is a lucid interval and there is an infiltrate, only that the eye is very congested and there is matting of the lashes, which is atypical of catarrhal ulcer. Also, you can see a little discharge in the nasal canthus. So this is HSV blepharoconjunctivitis. This is a primary form of HSV, which is contagious, as opposed to the reactivation of dendrites, which happens from the ganglion. And this is usually seen in the younger age group. So why should we distinguish this from staph marginal ulcer? Because over there, steroid is the treatment. But over here, if we give topical steroid, we can actually aggravate the HSV into proliferation. So here the treatment is with topical or systemic antiviral agents. Speaking of viral infections, so here you have lid edema, but the lid itself is normal. You have tiny SPKs. And these SPKs are not so small like your adenoviral SPKs, and they are not stuck on like microsporidal keratitis. This is the crater-like SPKs of EBV keratitis. Epstein-Barr virus infection is very rare in our part of the world. It is more common in the West, where there is infectious mononucleosis common among teenagers. It's the kissing disease of the West. This teenager had history of travel, and I put up this slide because when rarely suspected, serology is important. Because IgG denotes past disease, whereas if IgM is seen, it indicates active mono, and that alone may benefit with antiviral treatment. So recurrent freccular conjunctivitis, keratoconjunctivitis can be set up by lid margin disease. The usual culprit is the staph antigens on the lid, but rarely it can be because of tuberculosis or chlamydial disease. Here you can see a youngster with recurrent flictin. And it used to keep coming back again and again until we saw that he had folliculosis of the scalp. We referred him to the dermatologist, and once the scalp became clean, you can see in the last picture that the flictin has gone away. Yet another small child with recurrent fleccular keratoconjunctivitis, but then it was treated outside, and when we saw the patient, we noticed a pucker. So we opened it up and we found a sand particle, as you can see in the second picture. So this was a mimic. So this was a reactionary response, and after we removed that particle, the entire thing resolved completely. Rosacea keratitis is a very severe form of meibomian keratoconjunctivitis. It is again very rare in our part of the world. You can see in the panel that there is severe acne because the basic pathology is autoimmunity, and dysregulation of vascular vessels. And in the second picture, you can see the telangiectasia producing rhinophyma. And in the lower panel, you can see prominent chalasia, and that has led to severe vascularization and inflammatory response in the inferior cornea, leading to limbal stem cell deficiency. You can see in the second picture below, and then later that even proceeds to a melt. Treatment is like meibomian gland disease, only that systemic therapy with immunosuppression is quite often indicated. And probably these are the cases which actually merit in-office therapy with LipiFlow and IR therapy, as well as meibomian gland expression. So yet another form of blepharitis. Here you can see that the inferior cornea is inflamed, and in the picture below, the circled area shows collarettes or cuffs around the lashes. When this is seen, you have to suspect Demodex infestation. Demodex is a common commensal, but it can become a mighty mite and set up severe inflammation. And treatment is cleaning with tea tree oil, which is best done in office, because sometimes when the patient does it themselves, the dilution is not adequate. It was reported in the recent cornea that toxic effects can happen on the cornea, so it is best done in the clinic. So we saw that there could be oil on the lid, there could be dirt on the lid, there could be mite on the lid, and scaling it up one more notch, there could be lice on the lashes. Tyriasis palpebrum, quite often associated with tyriasis pubis. I don't have a picture over here, but it's quite commonly seen in people who can't take care of themselves, those in foster homes and orphanages, etc. Treatment is systematic delousing with the help of a dermatologist. I have had occasion to pick out these creepies from the lashes of some less privileged children. So these are some of the effects on the cornea and ocular surface because of the lids. But then in the blink of a lid, you may have other things which deceptively looks like these. So here, for example, is a child who was treated for limbal follicles because of lid margin disease, only that the lid is clean. And if you see, this is not a follicle over here, it's more of a flat nodule. And the child came back with strongly positive MANTO, and a strongly positive MANTO in a small child is very indicative of extrapulmonary tuberculosis when the chest CT is normal. While reading MANTO, it is more important to read the area of induration rather than the erythema. So this child responded very well to the anti-tuberculous treatment. You can see the diffuse nodule in the ACT in the panel below. This again is yet another child who was treated for long days with topical steroids as catarrhal ulcer secondary to lid disease. When he presented to us, we got a vague history of trauma. And when we stained him, that is when we got the diagnosis. You can see in the circled areas that there are two aspects. One is that the ulcer is very close to the limbus. There is no lucid interval. And you can also see stippling of the conjunctiva. So the conjunctival aberration, which was caused by the trauma, never healed completely. It was not allowed to heal because of the topical steroids that he was using. And you can see in the slit picture that that area of conjunctival edema is producing a Dellen effect. So it's not a marginal ulcer. All we did was take him off the steroid, put him on copious lubrication, and then he resolved completely. Sometimes we have treated these with Prose lenses for healing, and at times we've done for a patient amniotic graft to heal that conjunctiva. So like recurrent corneal erosion, recurrent conjunctival erosion is a rare but significant entity which must be kept in mind while treating these patients.
1 minute remaining, ma'am.
Yes, please. Here is another child who was again treated for lid margin disease. But you can see over here in the first picture that there is so much of lucid interval. It's hardly marginal. In the previous patient, there was no lucid interval, and here it is close to the pupillary area. And immune disease is very rare in children, but this 7-year-old girl had septic arthritis. She was HLA-B27 positive, and the rheumatologist diagnosed her to have juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. So she had developed an incidental bacterial ulcer, which we had scraped. It started healing with treatment. But in the panel below, you can see healing brought vascularization. And that led to melt because the immunity was active in her blood. So the infection did not cause the melt, but the vascularization did. So we had to actually take her to the OT and recess the pannus, after which she healed completely. And she was put on steroid sparing because of her young age, disease-modifying agent in the form of mycophenolate mofetil. So last but not the least, factitious corneal disorder, self-induced ocular surface inflammation is a diagnosis of exclusion. So this usually presents bilaterally, and there is very little anterior chamber involvement, and the inferior portion of the eye is involved because the patients have more access to this. So this is a high school boy who was treated for recurrent staph immune marginal lid-related disease, but you can see in the inset that the lid is clean. turned out that he was putting sanitizer gel in the inferior fornix to avoid his online classes, and prohibiting this access by admitting the patient and giving both supportive treatment as well as supportive counseling can help in resolution, because factitious disorder, if proven in a confirmed manner, can spare the patient of long-term and hazardous therapy unnecessarily. So with that, I conclude my presentation. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
That was a truly wonderful presentation. A variety of situations were shown very well. Before I ask, hello, Dr.
Namaskar. Sorry for delay. I got hooked up in a many programs.
Yeah, I know. Anyway, you are there, so that makes a big difference. So I have a question related to Radhika's talk. I would want the expert panel to answer me. What would you do if there's a flare-up after stopping capsule doxy? How long would you restart and how long would you continue? And again, in your context of that pediatric age group, you said erythromycin would be a better drug than doxy. What should be the duration of erythromycin, which should be given, and also the topical steroids in a pediatric age group?
Want me to take that or somebody else?
Yeah, okay, go ahead, tell. Yes.
So basically in pediatric age group, erythromycin works better because doxy can cause tooth staining. And the standard dosage of both these medication is under a month, because we are using it mostly for the anti-inflammatory and not the antibiotic effect. There are 2 or 3 things which can be done to prolong the effect of both steroid as well as these anti-inflammatory agents. One is to continue the lash scrubs. That is very important, because it is the meibomian altered secretion that gets into the tears and sets up the inflammation. So unless that cause is removed, any medication is going to have only a temporary effect. And like I already mentioned in my talk, the other meibomian disorders in the form of scalp dandruff and acne in the face, everything has to come under control, because like allergy, this is an overall problem. So if we treat all the components, if the lid cleaning is continued, and if we give this for 1 month, and if we sometimes want to overlap the of these medications with the tacrolimus to the longer
run. Dr. Praveen?
No, I just wanted to ask, I'm not sure if Dr. Radhika can hear us. You were breaking up in the middle, but very nice talk. And the panelists as well. That, very nice compendium of disorders that include both the lid, the conjunctiva, and the cornea. And a lot of times these are confusing as well. And sometimes when you have things that occur primarily on the cornea, you tend to have lid inflammation. When you have things occurring in the lid, you tend to have cornea conjunctiva inflammation. So are there any tips for the postgraduate students about how you would zero in on the source? What are the clues of zeroing on the primary source of where this is starting?
So I think yeah, I'm sorry. If it was not for me, then somebody else.
No, I wanted Praveen, Dr. Praveen, you were asking Radhika?
Yeah, I'm sure everybody will have a different answer. Anybody, this is all very practical. This is not something that is textbook based. So you have your own clues. Yeah, please yes, go ahead. Dr. Pityal, Merle, Namrata, anybody.
I think the primary pathology you would know, of course, by the history, because, it would have started either from the lid or from the conjunctiva or from the cornea, wherever. The symptoms from wherein they start, for instance, if it is an itchy lid, or if it is, just itching in the eyes, or if it is, starting with the congestion, or it is starting with the, edematous lids. So that would sort of give you a clue as to where it all started from. And you very rightly said that all these things, 3 things, they tend to be interrelated. And it is possible that when the patient comes to you, all 3 things are affected, or only 1 or 2 of these things are affected.
So I think
it will be primarily also by the inflammation of the entire ocular surface, which would include your cornea, conjunctiva, and the lid, all 3 of them. So I think that should give you a clue. Yes.
And also the recurrent nature. when you suspect something and when you are treating, it's not going away, then you have to look for other area or other source. And another thing is the molluscum in the eyelid or somewhere in the periocular area, which can be sitting and causing recurrent SPKs, or which can be easily missed out, and which can be thought about. We will think that it is a corneal problem. Unless you carefully examine the lid margins and the periocular skin, then you can miss it out. So that is another clue. If it is recurrent and not responding to your proposed treatment, then you have to look for any other source. That also is another clue. And one more question to Dr. Radhika: how to differentiate between the SPK of EBV and the Thygessence? Because your picture, it looked
that
almost
would come later. Dr.
Okay.
Revati, that question would come later. Dr. Merle, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, so the other thing that I think we should look at is the signs actually tell you a lot.
We
So
would
if you're
like to
looking
see you
at,
too.
okay, sorry. Right, so the signs actually tell you a lot. And if you need to differentiate between, say, marginal keratitis, as Dr. Radhika was describing, the lesions would be from 2, 4, 8, and 10, where the lid touches the cornea. But when you look at HSV marginal keratitis, there the clinical picture is slightly different. You'll have a lesion which does not obey these particular points, and also it tends to spread centrally as opposed to circumferentially. Also, you'll have a component of significant amount of inflammation because it's close to the limbus, so the patients will be more symptomatic. And there'll be a component of vascularization, both superficial and deep. There may be adjacent scars. If you stain with fluorescein, you'll be able to see a geographic pattern, particularly when there's an epithelial defect associated. And that would be one of the clues. For flictins on the cornea, which can also happen, you'll have a leash of vessels chasing a focal infiltrate. And this also could happen anywhere on the cornea, but mostly, in association with the lid, particularly when it's related to, a blepharokeratoconjunctivitis of MGD origin.
Can I come in?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So one thing I practically like to do is pay a lot of attention to the staining pattern. Fluorescent stain is the most important instrument which we miss out on many times. The staining pattern gives a lot of story about the lesion, especially whether it's coming from the deeper down, like what Dr. Radhika was talking about, episcleritis staining, negative, nothing at all. You're talking about something which is related to staph blepharitis. You know that wherever the staph antigens are touching the cornea, you're going to get staining there. But the rest of the area may not be as much showing the stain. So apart from all the discussion what we had, paying attention to the staining pattern is something which I would really like. Also regarding Demodex, many times earlier we used to miss out on diagnosing Demodex. Now we sometimes overdiagnose Demodex. Demodex are going to be there in commensal. They are going to be there in eyelashes, not just eyelashes. They are there in the skin. They are there everywhere across. So treating alone eyelashes sometime, according to me, is not as useful. In fact, you know what best I like to do is I ask them to start change their bathing soap to tea tree oil soap, and that does wonders because using the tea tree oil soap on an entire body actually helps much better, because many times the transmission is through the skin where they're sleeping with the hand on the eye and all those things, which we cannot avoid if you're only treating the lid margin. So these are the couple of points which I just wanted to make.
Any
In
other
fact,
question?
for the MRSA, just one small point. In children, especially who have the staph infections, a lot of them harbor it in their nasal mucosa, and a lot of pediatricians will recommend the use of mupirocin, like tea-backed ointment in the nose for a couple of weeks to get rid of that focus. And I think what Himanshu mentioned, the bath with bacteriostatic body wash or something like that would also definitely help to curb the recurrences.
The patient in whom the folliculosis was there was put on T-back. After that, only his flictin kind of dissolved. And where the lid touches the cornea, if the lesion is there, it is likely to be lid related. And a lot of the time, the clue can be got from the other eye also. So the eye in which the keratoconjunctivitis is not there also will reveal some amount of lid abnormality. And somehow I always place emphasis on the way they rub the eye. If the patient rubs the eye back and forth like this, is likely to be allergy. Whereas if they do it like a toothpaste-like manner, toothbrush-like manner, it is likely to be because of lid disease. So I actually tell them to show me how they rub the eyes.
Any other question, Dr. Praveen? I have one very simple question.
No, maybe you should just ask the question, because I was just trying to bring what everybody said together, because I mean, brilliant points individually, but this is a very complex set of diseases caused by so many other things. But I think sort of the takeaway is the fact that you suspect a blepharokeratoconjunctivitis that is not caused by routine things like conjunctivitis. When you have involvement of multiple parts of the ocular surface, like Namrata said, and also when routine treatment doesn't work, and when you have bilateral affection, and also when you have an underlying skin problem, start to look for things that are not unusual. I think that is a fantastic point that came across from everyone. Yeah. So go on, Chitra.
No, just one very basic question. When you start cyclosporin for rosacea keratitis, how long would you give? Because it's a chronic ailment. How long would you advise patients to be carried on with that?
That's for me
to ask. Yes.
So rosacea itself is reasonably uncommon in our part of the world. So the immunosuppression will have to continue systemically for a short while and topically for a longer duration. So topical tacrolimus is reasonably well tolerated because we keep giving it for vernal catarrh. So it can be given for a few months. But the supportive treatment in the form of in-office therapy for a few patients that we've had till now seems to work better. We have this, Meibomian lounge now where you can, express and give infrared therapy, etc. The couple of patients that I have had seem to get some, benefit out of this. So that cuts short a little bit of the immunosuppressive treatment systemically.
You have anything to add, Dr. Praveen, or shall we go on to the next speaker?
No, I think we should move on.